Well, welcome to our next podcast, and I'm really pleased with today's guest. Geoff Hutchinson is joining us, and Bill will do a bit more of a formal introduction, but I've known Geoff for some years, and I'd have to describe him as one of the nice guys in the business world. He's a very engaging person and has just come back from 3 months of travelling around Australia, so we'll touch on that later. But Bill, tell us more about Geoff.
Thanks, Mark, and welcome again to another entertaining podcast. We're really enjoying these sessions and got many more coming up. So, Geoff, and welcome to you.
Thanks, Bill.
Good. You have an interesting background, and I guess you're probably a bit like the two of us. You've had a roller coaster corporate life or business life, and you fit in what I call our definition of the 50 plus brigade, and you have decided to refire and not retire over the last 2 or 3 years or even longer, as many of us have, and that's why we're interested in your story. And the interesting thing about today is that you've come from we'll hear a bit more about where you've come from, but really a high-profile corporate life, and here you are today running a drone company. In fact, what's the name of that business?
Barwon Drone?
Oh, Barwon Drone. Now, to do this, you've had to reinvent yourself. And I notice that you hold a current remote pilot's licence, as well as airway radio operations certificate. And your company, Barwon Drone Photography, holds a current remote piloted aircraft operations certificate, etc., etc. And they are new skills that you've picked up in recent times.
So, Geoff, where did it all begin? Start with where were you born? Let's go right back. Where did you grow up? And the early years in Geoff's life.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm a Geelong boy. I grew up on the Bellarine Peninsula, and my family were dairy farmers at the Bellarine. And we had a dairy farm down there with potatoes and onions, but I decided early in my life that milking cows and picking up onions and potatoes wasn't going to be for me. So I joined the National Bank at a very young age, because that's the sort of thing you did in those days. I didn't have any qualifications. I left high school, joined the NAB, and I worked for them for 6.5 years in a variety of positions. Teller, clerk, and then branch accountant at the latter part. And then I left them to join Beneficial Finance to do a management role in a consumer finance company. And all of these things are good experiences, because what you have some education and then you have some experience, and then all of a sudden you're learning some things. And what I learned from the NAB and the Beneficial Finance was I really didn't have a formal education. And so there were a lot of doors that I couldn't open. And as a consequence of that, I made a conscious decision in my life at that moment in time to go back to uni and do a mature age degree in commerce. And I became an accountant, and it took 6 years of night school as well as working, and then 4 years to get my CPA. So what I found was that education is a key that opens the door, and when you have some experience and you add the experience to that education, things start to change. And I guess my life story was young country boy, doesn't want to be a farmer, gets some commercial experience, joins a bank and a finance company, realises the world could be a better place if he had an education, and then moves on. I got a job with a construction company, which was a Dutch public company. It was called World Services and Construction. It changed my life. I had the opportunity to work in an industry where I felt really connected to the people. The construction industry is down to earth. People call a spade, and they make things. And it was different to finance. When you actually build something, you have the satisfaction of seeing what it looks like.
And was that overseas, Geoff?
Started here in Australia, and an interesting part of that story is I worked for them first as a payroll officer and then later as a junior accountant. Then I started to do my degree part-time, and I just about got finished the degree, and the management approached me and said, we have an opportunity to go to Singapore. We need a financial controller there, and you're recently qualified for that now. Would you be interested in going? So I immediately said yes, went home and discussed it with Pam, and then in those days you didn't have Google. We looked up a map to see where it was. So I already said yes, rather than thinking about it too much, because I thought it was a great opportunity. Which sort of takes me back to what Bill said before. You know, I think you have choices in life, and some people, my friends' choices, and there's nothing wrong with choices, they like the merry-go-round. I make the analogy, the merry-go-round and the roller coaster. Bill used that word. So merry-go-rounds are where people feel comfortable and safe, and they keep doing the same thing, and that's their world, and that's okay. I was kind of like the roller coaster, because the roller coaster is exhilarating and scary, and I found my career became a roller coaster.
So when did you come back to Australia and end up at the Bendigo Bank?
We were 5 years in Southeast Asia, living in Singapore, Malaysia and Brunei, building petrochemical and refinery complexes and doing ship repairs. And I had a staff of 300 and I was 2IC, and then I eventually became the managing director. So what actually happened was the group promised to replace me so I could come back to Australia and be the director of a $100 million company. And I came back to Australia, but every 8 weeks I went back to Singapore to manage the business because they didn't have a replacement. And that went for 7 years.
It's a long handover.
And then my wife came to me one day and said, would you like to get a new job or a new wife? So I made a move and left World Services and got a job as a financial controller for Austin Group, clothing importing company at the time. They had about a 60 million turnover. They had quite a few issues, and they brought me in to help turn things around. And we went from a poor profit performance after their listing to I turned the company, helped them turn the company around to a 2 or 3 million profit within 18 months.
Right. Geoff, and now bringing it up to date somewhat, we know that the business you're running with Barwon Drones is also, I guess, in partnership with your wife's own photography business. And listeners will hear from Pam later on, because in her own right she has built a very successful business here in Geelong, and we'd love to hear her story. What was the tipping point, and what got you to think about merging into this media type organisation and getting into drones?
Yeah, I guess if you fast forward, I had a couple of more corporate gigs. I wanted to become a CEO, and I became the CEO of a software company called Ocean Software, which supplied fighter squadron software to most of the military organisations in Australia and overseas. That was quite a successful period for me, but after 7 years there, the company moved its focus to the UK and they engaged a retired general, and I left the company to join the Bendigo Bank's community telco, and then I had 10 years there building that up from myself in an office to 2,000 customers and a 10 million turnover in that time frame. Again, that life has its little quirks, and they merged that business back to Bendigo, and I became redundant. Interestingly, Pam had a successful photography business that I had concurrently helped her develop over 20 years with a very good client base in Geelong, delivering commercial media. And I was a bit of, honestly, I think sometimes it's when things don't turn out how you expect, that's sometimes an opportunity to change. And what actually happened to me, I was quite depressed after being in the telco for 10 years, and I picked myself up, and Pam gave me a drone for Christmas. And inherently through my whole career, what I've always been interested in is how technology, a small amount of technology, can leverage an organisation. And in my whole career, that had been something all along the way. In the construction company, I implemented new reporting systems. In the Austin Group, I implemented some contract reporting and control systems for their overseas buying. In Ocean Software, we changed the face of military aviation management globally, which I was really proud of. And in the telco, I introduced telehealth and video conferencing infrastructure around the region. So I'd had this theme of a small amount of technology can make a big difference. So Pam bought me this drone and I was playing with it and thinking, wow, this is really interesting and great technology. I wonder what could be done to it. And I guess I threw myself into it and learnt all about it. And Pam's interesting said that she gave me the drone, but I didn't do anything for a month because I went so much into depth of how it worked, what it does and how it could be used before I actually used it. And once I started using it, it became a passion. Interestingly, when I was a kid, I used to have this dream, if you like, that if I would jump off a roof and I could fly. And I guess this change of life for me gave me a new way to experience flying without leaving the ground. And I quickly, because of my management experience, could see how it could be beneficial to corporations and how the technology could be applied. So,
just on that point, it's a much softer landing of a drone than jumping off a roof.
It was actually. It was into a ploughed paddock, yeah.
So Geoff, it's interesting. We've spoken to a number of people that have had that, as Bill calls it, a tipping point where they've been made redundant and then they've reinvented themselves. So grabbing that drone and knowing you would do everything possible to learn how it works, flies, what you can do, what you can't do, what license you need. So you did all that homework. How did you then grow your business? Lots of people start with a great business idea. You had the idea, you've got a drone, how do I use it? Who was your first customer, or how did you get into your first customer?
I guess the good part about coming from a corporate background, I had a lot of experience and I understood that you can't be all things to all people. So I decided to focus on what could be done with the drone that would benefit companies and what space, because there's a lot of, basically most people that start with drones kind of do real estate photography and everyone's doing that, and I understood the importance in business of actually working in a niche. So I tried to look at how drones could be utilised in other ways to collect information and be a value add. And that kind of, on the basis that Pam already had a media business and we could provide video movies that would promote business, and my deep understanding of business, of how to succinctly capture what was important about a business and represent that in a video, actually led us to doing a lot of commercial work and making videos for companies. So yeah, I guess that was the key.
Well, talking about flying drones, we all know people who have bought drones and do all sorts of things with it, and I've come across a couple in particular that are in the agricultural industry. They're using drones to great effect. But I read out at the beginning your qualifications. How important is it to get accredited and do the professional accreditation that you've done to, I guess, for any drone flyer, or what are they, pilots, drone pilots?
Yeah, this is sort of, it starts from the simplest end. I guess it's horses. The answer is it's horses for courses. So if you're doing simple stuff like real estate photography, then you can operate the business not necessarily with qualifications, but you can operate under a particular licensing regime. Yeah. But if you want to do serious drone work, you need to have what's called an REPL, which is a remote pilot's license, and you need to have a CASA license as well, so that you can authorise, so you can do flights and do them in a professional manner.
Well, just on that point, then, I've seen a couple of your productions, and one is the Tasmanian Ferry, because that's coming to Geelong next month. So you're out there over the bay with your drone, but hang on, there's a big airport next to it. So is that another issue around regulations? And
if you have a remote pilot's license, then you have to understand what the regulations are, and as long as you can't fly in a 5.5 kilometre zone of near an airport. So that's one of the key regulations that you have to be aware of. But there are numerous regulations you have to be aware of in a drone operation. You can't fly over a populous area, and there's definition of populous. So
do you do a flight plan, Geoff?
Yes, yeah. So if you take a few steps back, if you're doing, no matter how simple the work is, you still need to follow the drone regulations, and the more complex the work is, the more tedious you have to be about it. So, I work for major corporations who want you to be doing everything in accordance with the rules. Yeah, so there's software available now. So prior to doing a flight, you have to do a flight plan, and that has to be, and if you have a REPL like I do, you have to record every flight, and that has a whole bunch of data and information. You have to have a flight plan, you have to show the location, you have to be aware of the CASA regulations and abide by those. So,
all right, I'm interested. Tell me about the most exciting assignment you've done, and maybe you can finish that off with the most disastrous one you've done.
There's plenty of disasters with drone operations. I think the most exciting thing that we did was not long after I started the business, we had an opportunity to bid for work in Queensland, and it was for a university, and what they were doing is they were doing medical training, and we flew all around. We basically had the job of creating a series of short videos on all the different disciplines in medical training for doctors, and so we bid for a project where we went over all of far north Queensland and produced 32 videos in each location on all the different disciplines, and in doing so, that was really fantastic experience.
And the worst crash you've had?
The worst crash during that project was I was flying a drone around at a lake and thought I was flying away parallel to the lake, and I flew into a tree at 70 kilometres an hour and disintegrated the drone, but didn't hurt anyone.
It's that sort of reputational risk and damage more so than physical damage, isn't it?
Yeah, and it hurt the ego too, that I made a mistake. Yeah.
So, Geoff, the one thing many things I like about you, but I love the fact that you embrace technology and you're always looking for the next. So where do you see your business or where do you see drone technology heading? What's the next thing that you're working towards or creeping towards, without giving away trade secrets, obviously? But
the industry can start off with something quite simple, like just doing real estate photography, which a lot of people are in that space. And then it can move into the more complex areas of data collection and reporting. So our next phase of growth, we're moving into drone work that actually captures data, and it can be applied to a range of industries like construction, mining, agriculture. And so the drone industry is one of the fastest growing industries in the world, and it has a tremendous amount of opportunities and has a lot of challenges. I see where we're going to next is we're starting to do drone flights that capture data, and an example of that might be that you would say in quarrying or mining, you could fly over a mine several times and capture data that measures how much soil's been removed. It's a simple thing. And that normally had to be done manually and on the ground and costs a lot of money, and you can now do that in a couple of flights. And it's the same in construction. You can fly over a construction site and gather all kinds of data that is beneficial for construction organisations to use to manage projects.
Brilliant.
All right, now you're a typical, there's no such thing as a typical, your family business. Husband and wife working together.
Yes.
What's the secret to survival? Husband and wife working together.
Oh, just do what you're told when you're told.
Well, I'm sure Pam will be listening to this,
Yeah,
so that'll be it. Yeah, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Yeah.
No, I think the secret is if you have a healthy relationship and you've got a focus and you acknowledge one another's skills, strengths and weaknesses, then you can work together, and communication is an important part of that, and knowing what you're good at and what you're not good at. Yeah, and Pam's a creative that loves her craft and has a complete passion for it, and I come more from an administrative management and strategic perspective, and when you marry sort of creative to disciplined management procedures, you come up with a pretty good result.
That's very wise advice, Geoff, because I have dealt with some family businesses in the past, and there's no sort of demarcation line between responsibilities. And the result of that, of course, is the employees get confused before anyone else does.
So, Geoff, you've just come back from a 3-month trip, and no doubt you took copious quantities of drone footage while you did. So tell us a little bit about your rest and relaxation. What do you do? Is travelling around with your van your relaxation?
Yeah, Pam and I love to travel. That's our passion. And we like to enjoy the environments that we visit. And photography and the capture of imagery actually enhances the whole experience of travelling, because it makes you look carefully at things and enjoy what's around you. So we took over 2 terabytes of photography and drone footage over 90 days and travelled 19,700 k's across Australia and met some amazing people, and we saw some beautiful things. So like capturing the beauty around you. And the thrill of drone work is actually you can put a camera anywhere and you can see things and put things in a different perspective that you couldn't ordinarily do. My personal passion is creating panoramic views of locations, whereas Pam's more of a detail person. She likes to photograph the birds and the environment. But when you put the two things together, you can get a holistic picture of an environmental location. We went to Kakadu, and we went to Flinders Ranges, and we went to Karajini and Kalbarri. We went to about 7 different national parks in Australia and saw some splendid beauty, and it was just a pleasure to be present and capture that.
Which one stood out the best? Which is the one that sits in your mind and you rethink, that was the best place and I've got great footage of it?
It's really hard to say what is the best, but 2 outstanding locations out of the ones that I mentioned, or maybe 3, I would be very hard to separate. Cape Le Grand at Esperance for its beauty of Lucky Bay and all the beauty that's in that location. And another place that I found absolutely stunning was Kalbarri, which is just above Geraldton, an absolutely wonderful place. But the one that, as we moved closer back to home, we went in a clockwise direction from Geelong across the Nullarbor to Perth, and then up the coast to Broome, and then over to Kakadu, and then Darwin, and then back down through Katherine. We ended up at the tail end of our trip at the Flinders Ranges, and the Flinders Ranges were so accessible, so beautiful, and seemed to have a lot. It's interesting, we travelled 19,700 kilometres and we saw more national wildlife in the Flinders Ranges than we did in the other 18,000 kilometres. So I got a little soft spot for the Flinders Ranges out of all of it, because we had access to some places and got fantastic results there.
Just, okay, on another theme now, we've interviewed a couple of people who, in fact, what you talk about retrenched, we interviewed a gentleman recently, and he told us that after the interview, actually, that he was retrenched from a job, and he sat down and cried for 3 days, didn't he, before he saw the next opportunity. So what's your advice for people who are stuck somewhere in life, whatever it is, about breaking free and following their passion and starting a business, that will take them into the next era of their lifespan?
Okay, so an excellent question. Yeah, I think if I reflect on my own experience, I spent 10 years building the community telco for the Bendigo Bank, and that was really a social enterprise. It had an ethos that was very aligned to my own value systems, that it was an entity that was building something that was good for business but put back into the community. And I actually got that business to be having a reoccurring income that put $60,000 back into social enterprises in Geelong. That gave me a lot of personal pride, etc., and satisfaction. And
so your advice to somebody that wants to make a move out of their current employment into entrepreneurship, as we say?
Yeah, social entrepreneurship, I would have called that. Yeah. So when that ended, because it merged back to Bendigo and they brought all the entities together, I was equally devastated on a personal level. And I guess my advice to someone when that happens is, I think changes in your life are opportunities to reinvent yourself. And I've reinvented myself 4 times in my career. I was in banking and finance, and then I was in construction, and then I was in importing, and then I was in software. But what I identified when I reflected at the end of my community telco career was inherent in all of that, I had a passion, not for technology per se, but for making things better. I wanted to make a difference, and I realised inherently in myself is I wanted to do something with my life that made a difference. And technology is a lever, so a small amount of technology can make a big difference. An example of that was when I was at the Ocean Software. A small group of guys built a bit of software for one Air Force base in Australia that changed the face of military aviation globally, and I was part of that journey and won the Emerging Exporter of the Year with the Victorian Governor. That gave so much satisfaction, more than just money, to actually be able to make a difference. So when I was feeling very miserable after I left the telco, and not unlike your colleague, you feel really flat when you've been totally focused on something for 10 years and then it stops. There's a void. But I thought long and hard about it, and interestingly, is sometimes a lot of things in my life have been planned and organised and strategised because that's who I am and that's how I operate. But on this occasion, I just decided to have a break, and Pam gave me a drone for Christmas. And because I love technology and want to know everything about it, I learnt everything about what that could do before I even flew it. And then I started to realise it. And one of my inherent strengths, and a lot of people can have this when they've got experience, is you start to see how you can join the dots. And I thought, gee, a drone can do this. I've worked in construction, I've worked in military aviation, and I've got these contacts. You can reinvent yourself by thinking, well, I haven't lost everything. I've got a network, I've got friends, I've got a brain. There's new technologies and there's new markets. And I've always been a person, because my hobby's game fishing, and I always think you should fish where the fish are. So I started to think, I've left that industry, where should I be fishing now? And I started to see the growth of the drone industry. And I'm a great forward thinker, so I could see far ahead how that could benefit organisations and how it could grow rapidly. It's proven to be the case. So my advice would be, have a break if you can, take stock of things, find your passion, and your passion gives you your internal direction. And, hark back to when I was a kid, I dreamt I could fly. My passion was really a quest for growth and knowledge in using technology to make a difference.
That's fantastic, Geoff. I thank you for that. That's a really, really good wrap up, I suppose, to our podcast. And who would have thought a boy from the Bellarine picking onions would be now running drones all around Australia? I just think it's a fantastic story. So, Geoff, thank you for your time. Thank you for being so open and sharing.
Yeah, thank you, Mark, and thank you, Geoff. That was great. as that's why we call this podcast of ours True Business Stories, because everyone has a story to tell. So we look forward to catching up with the other half of your business at some time in the future. And once again, our deepest thanks.